And if you're willing and able, remain standing as we read God's word together. Today's scripture comes from John chapter 10, verses 1 through 18. John 10, 1 through 18. As per usual, the words will be on the screen, also on the stream. But if you have your Bible, I encourage you to open it up. John 10, 1 through 18, reading in the NASB. Let's read God's word together, shall we? Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter by the door into the fold of the sheep, but climbs up some other way, he is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is a shepherd of the sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he puts forth all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. A stranger they simply will not follow, but will flee from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. This figure of speech Jesus spoke to them, but they did not understand what those things were which he had been saying to them. So Jesus said to them again, Truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who is not the owner of the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he is a hired hand, is not concerned about the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my own, and my own know me, even as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep which are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will hear my voice, and they will become one flock with one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life so that I may take it again. No one has taken away from me, but I lay it down on my own initiative. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This commandment I received from my Father. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. Welcome back to the I Am series, where until summertime we're going to be looking at the 7 I Am sayings of Jesus throughout the book of John. So far we've looked at the first 2, I am the bread of life, where Jesus says, I am the thing that you need, the basic necessity of your life, without which you cannot live. And then last week through Pastor Chris, we heard that he is the light of the world. He that illuminates the world, both good and bad, but also gives light to it. Light, another thing without which we have quite difficulty living. Now, this week things take a bit of a turn as Jesus calls himself the Good Shepherd, and in association, the door through which the sheep enter and leave the sheep pen. Now, I say things take a turn here because the imagery, Jesus as God and shepherd, in truth, is actually a bit insulting and degrading of God and Jesus. Right? Because for someone who just called himself the bread and the light, to compare himself then to a shepherd is a major step down. Now, for those of us who've grown up in the church, we're quite familiar with Jesus as God and Jesus and God, as shepherd. Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Luke 15, Jesus is the brave shepherd that goes out, leaves the 99, chases the one afterwards, brings him home, all that kind of stuff. So we think shepherds are a great thing. We're quite fond of this imagery. But in truth, especially in those days, a shepherd wasn't anyone people looked up to. A shepherd was not anyone that anyone actually wanted to be. Why? Because the job itself is a very dangerous and thankless job. Shepherds were low in the social rankings, and shepherds were nothing more than just basic blue-collar, hard-working laborers, and they were not viewed well by people, especially the religious Jews of the day. So Jesus comparing himself to a shepherd is not a compliment, right? Now, with all that in mind, we have to ask ourselves the overall question of the series that we've been asking. What is Jesus telling us about himself? What is Jesus trying to point out specifically by telling us that he is the door and the good shepherd? What is he saying about his character, his heart, his identity? And therefore, learning what it says about him, how does that impact our lives? What difference does that make? That's kind of the overall sense. Now, before we dive into the context and then break this down, a little caveat, 2 little caveats that I have to, programming notes, if you will, before we jump in. First, Jesus wants to make sure that we remember that in calling himself the shepherd, it means that yes, we're sheep, but more importantly, we are his sheep. Right? His sheep. That has to be important. You have to keep that in mind all the way through. I am his sheep. But then the second thing, and the reason why keeping in mind I am his sheep is important, is by calling himself a shepherd, it means that we are sheep, and what's true about sheep is true about us. Sheep are quite dumb as animals. They are animals who cannot survive without outside protection and guidance, and so all those things are also true of us. So if you do not like that, remember, we are his sheep, that matters, but we are sheep indeed. And that's going to be important because those are things that Jesus assumes we understand about the imagery that he's giving us. Okay? So keep that in mind as we go through, and then we'll go. Now, here's how we're going to navigate this text, okay? We're going to examine the three images that Jesus gives. Pretty simple. He says he's a shepherd. He said he's the door or the gate. And then he says, I am the good shepherd, which is different from just a regular shepherd, as we'll see. Shepherd, the door, and then the good shepherd. Now, let's do a little background, and then we'll jump into it. Jesus is speaking these words in response to what happens just before. In particular, chapter 9, 34 through 41. Now, if we jump back to chapter 8, Jesus is in the temple. You heard about it last week through Pastor Chris, if you were here. And this is where Jesus says he's the light of the world. Now, at the end of this discussion with the Pharisees, they get so mad that they basically want to stone him. But Jesus escapes. This happens a lot in his life. But on the way out of the temple, Jesus sees a blind man and goes, I should heal him. So then he does the mud with the spit, puts it on his eyes, says, go wash in the pool, and then he becomes, he's able to see again. But this happens on the Sabbath, and because it happens on the Sabbath, the Jews are not happy about this. Again, another prominent theme. And so in doing so, right, they kind of start to go crazy, the Pharisees. And the story is actually pretty funny if you break it down like this. Once they figured out that he's been healed, they go, hey, who did this to you? Where is he from? Yada, yada. And he's like, I don't really know. His name is Jesus. He told me to do this, and I'm healed. And then he goes, well, what do you think about him? And he goes, well, it doesn't really matter. I don't know, and so on and so forth. Then, because they don't believe him and they don't want to acknowledge the truth, then they ask his parents to come. They go, hey, are you sure this is your son? You sure he was born blind? And they're like, yes, this is my son. He was born blind. But what you want to know about that man, I don't know. Let my son speak for himself. He's an adult, essentially. So then they bring him back again. They question him. And then he's like, hey, I don't know what you're trying to do, dude. Like, I already told you everything that I know. It seems clear that y'all are kind of obsessed with this man. But here's what I'll tell you. All I know is that there's never been a man who's been able to heal someone born blind, right? Not someone who became blind and was healed later. Someone who was born blind. No one's been able to do this. And all I can tell you is that clearly God must be with this man, because who then could do these things? To be able to do something that's never been done before, clearly God has to be with him. And the Pharisees are incensed about this. And so in verse 34, we hear that they put him out, aka they throw him out the temple. More so, they excommunicate him basically from the faith and from the community. So then Jesus hears about this, not happy about it, seeks the man out, and then saves him. And then there are Pharisees who see this man getting saved, different from the ones before, and they're all confused too. And so then Jesus goes, okay, let me explain everything that happened so y'all are clear. And then he speaks these words. So this is not just Jesus teaching, this is in response to something that's happening. And so these words that he then says are commentary on both what he did and then what the Pharisees did. It's why in this I am saying is the first time there's a direct comparison. Before he's just I am bread, I am light. Now he's I am the shepherd versus thieves, robbers, and hired hands. Okay? So he's trying to tell us, why did I do what I did? Why does this matter? Why is it that y'all are confused? That's the questions that he's trying to answer. Okay? So keep that in mind. Let's then jump into the three things. First, I am shepherd. Now, I mentioned earlier that there are a lot of imageries and instances of shepherd references in the Bible. But the two that Jesus is probably focusing are on Numbers 27 and Ezekiel 34. In Numbers 27, this is right before they're about to enter the promised land. But Moses was told that he can't go in because of some mistakes that he made. And so he's handing off the leadership to Joshua. And as he's handing off the leadership to Joshua, this is what Moses says to him. He says, verse 16, 17. It should be on the screen. May the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over the congregation who will go out and come in before them, who will lead them out and bring them in, so that the congregation of Yahweh will not be like sheep which have no shepherd. So you see the idea of shepherds leading in and out, and that Moses says the people of God need a shepherd, okay, because they're sheep. Then Ezekiel 34, it won't be on the screen yet, but Ezekiel prophesies about, right, really bad shepherds of Israel. He's saying Israel's going to have a ton of bad shepherds, so bad that they're not going to feed the sheep, but they're going to feed themselves. which is a really bad shepherd. That's like parents not feeding their kids and just eating all the good stuff and literally starving them. Not good, right? So then because of that, he says, what's going to end up happening to Israel is they're going to get scattered. And what happens to scattered sheep? They become dead meat for all the animals in the wilderness to eat. If you leave a sheep out in the wild, it'll die. More so than die, it'll be eaten, because that's what happens to them. And then in verse 11 through 16 of Ezekiel 34, he then gives this long list of verbs of all that he, God, is going to do as a shepherd. Here's the list. It'll be on the screen for you, okay? He says, I'm going to search for them. I'm going to seek them. I'm going to care for them, deliver them, bring them out from the crowd, gather them, bring them to their own land, feed them, lead them to rest, bring back the scattered, bind up the broken, and strengthen the sick. It's a comprehensive list of everything that God as shepherd wants to do for these scattered sheep. And then, of course, if you then compare it to everything that the bad shepherds don't do, it is a terrible judgment on them and a striking comparison as to how good the shepherd is, God, and then how terrible the bad shepherds are. This is likely what Jesus is working with when he speaks these things. Now, let's bring it all back together and put it together for a bit. What Jesus is doing in seeing this blind man, giving him sight, and then later giving him salvation, is simply Jesus doing everything that Ezekiel 34 just told us. There's the list again. He's doing all of these things on the screen, if you click over. He's doing all of these things almost exactly to the T. So he's declaring himself as the shepherd that God promised. But yet, as he's doing these things, the Pharisees, Israel's shepherd also, put this man out. Simply, he's saying they're the bad ones and I'm the good one. It's a pretty simple illustration. And because they do so to this man, they're scattering him out. They leave him all alone, which again means what? Sheep alone in the wilderness are dead meat. He's saying what you have done to this man is literally left him to die. And then, in case anyone missed the point, he then just explains, I'm one of the good shepherds. They're robbers and thieves. I enter through the door because I'm known, but they have to sneak in because they don't have access. Now, right off the bat, Jesus is making a major point. He's asking this, are you seeing who is who? Are you seeing the difference? And if you see the difference, then who are you going to trust and who are you going to follow? Are you going to follow and trust a true shepherd? Or are you going to trust a thief and or a robber? Now, when you put the choices as true shepherd and a thief and a robber, let's be honest, that choice is pretty simple and easy to make, right? No one would be dumb enough to follow a thief and a robber over a shepherd. But in life, the choice is not so obvious, is it? Especially in today's day and world, right? It should be something really great versus something really terrible, so you choose a really good thing. That should be fairly easy, but I feel like in the world today, the choice isn't shepherd and thief and robber. It's more like this. It's Chick-fil-A versus McDonald's. Now, no judgments here, or maybe a little bit of judgment, but the choice should be obvious which one you should go to. Okay? It should be Chick-fil-A. Although, in real truth, I took the kids to McDonald's yesterday, twice. Okay? So, we love ourselves at McDonald's in our household, but Chick-fil-A should be the choice. Waffle fries are better, I think, but maybe not. But also, if you're in my house, my wife likes the Chick-fil-A ice cream. It's icy. It's not really creamy, but the McDonald's ice cream is really creamy. Anyways, this is kind of it. It's more like, whatever your preference. It's kind of however you like to choose. There's really no clear choice. Okay, maybe you like Chick-fil-A, maybe you like McDonald's. It's cool. McDonald's nostalgia, Chick-fil-A is apparently a little healthier, but it's cool. It should be clear, but that's not how it is. So then Jesus, because I think he understands that sometimes the choice isn't so clear, then makes the comparison. Listen to the comparison now, okay? He says, shepherds, they're the ones who know you and are known by you. Therefore, they belong. It's why they can go in and out the easy way, through the door. And the gatekeeper lets them in. It's like if you go to a fancy office or even even at a hotel or even in your apartment complex, you have to have an access card that has your picture on or whatever, and you go poof, and then it lets you up. Jesus has one of those. A true shepherd has one. The thief and the robbers, they don't have no access card. Therefore, they are not known, and they do not know. And they certainly do not belong. And so when they try to gain access, gatekeeper says, nope, you don't belong here. Your card don't work. Get out. And then they have to then try to sneak in, climb in through another way, because it's the only option that they have. But even more importantly, Jesus says, the difference between a shepherd and a thief and a robber is that the sheep know the voice of the shepherd. They don't know the voice of the robbers. They're strangers by definition. Now, here's the thing about voice recognition. I'm not talking about Siri or Alexa or Google. They're really good at it. I'm talking about human voice recognition. Okay? Now, imagine a room like this maybe, or even more crowded, of people, and they're talking actively. Imagine then trying to identify and distinguish the voice of one particular person in the room without the aid of your sight. Right? Pretty hard. Now, the only way you're going to be able to do this is, yes, through good hearing. If you can't hear, of course you can't do it. But more than good hearing, deep knowing. You have to know in your mind, right? You have to be able to hear, even without the voice being actively spoken, the characteristics of that voice, the tone and everything. It has to be crystal clear to you so you can pick it out amongst all the different voices. And how does this happen? It's pretty simple. Deep knowing happens through deep relationship, which only happens with time, conversation, listening, hearing, and so on and so forth. Here's how this works in real life. We see this quite often with parents and young children. We want to say parents all know their kids' voices because they love their kids and they love hearing their voices. It's most likely because kids will never stop crying, especially when they're babies, and so that voice is just embedded into your mind, and so you have to know it because you're a parent. But imagine this scenario. Let's say you're at one of our family YAGs, our small groups. 4 or 5 families meeting, and let's say it's like, 10 adults and there's like 12 or 13 kids. That's how it works at our church. There's more kids than adults, seemingly. So the adults are meeting over here in one room, and then the children are over here playing and doing their thing. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of a meeting, the parents are, whatever, they're discussing, doing their thing, and then all of a sudden, kid starts to cry. You know what will happen most of the time? One parent will get up because they know that's their kid. Everyone else will literally pretend like nothing happened. Why? Because that's not their kid. They know which one that is. Oh, that's mine. And then it's embarrassing when the person who thinks it's their kid and they mistake it, you're like, oh, you should know your kids better, right? But that's how it happens. Why? Because they know their voice. Parents get so good at this thing, they can distinguish, veteran parents. After a few years, they know the difference between the fake me out cry, the one where they're like opening their eyes and like pay attention to me, give me what I want cry, versus like the I'm really hurting and I need your help cry. They can distinguish those things. They know. It's voice recognition. What Jesus is trying to say is, that's how you can distinguish between the shepherd and the rest. To know who to follow is you have to know their voice. You have to know the ones who you really know and therefore are known by you. The one whose voice you can recognize, because there's a deep sense of knowing even in the midst of all the voices. You see, we live in a world, especially now more than ever, where we think we know a lot of people. You think we know the people online, on social media, and they try to convince you that they know you really, really well. But in truth, there are really only a few select people that really know you, right? They're the ones who have the access cards to your heart and soul. And you know who they are. They're the ones who know, just by the inflection in your voice, the tone and the speech and the rate which you speak, if something is wrong, if you're hurt or angry or upset. And what Jesus is saying is, that's me. When I saw this man, no one else recognized it, but I knew him. And then in the end, he recognized who Jesus was. So first, I pray and I hope for you that you would recognize how much Jesus knows you and therefore loves you, and that you would then come to know him and recognize his voice so that you would not follow any other in the world with so many voices. Now, unfortunately, and maybe for us too, the Pharisees at this point still don't get it. They probably should. So Jesus keeps on going. And he explains further, I am the door. Now imagine the sheep pen. Here's a picture for you. And the gate to get in and out. Now Jesus goes then from being the shepherd to then all of a sudden calling himself the door. And he says it simply. He says, everyone who came before me, they ain't the real door. They, again, are thieves and robbers. And the sheep did not hear them. But he says, I'm the door, and anyone who enters through me will be saved, and then will be able to go in and out and find pasture. Now here's what Jesus is saying. He's saying, because I'm the door, and again, like before, there are many other doors for which you to enter a sheep pen. But if you enter through me, this door, one, you will be saved, And then 2, you'll be able to go in and out of the pen. Now the second part is actually really important. He's saying, if the sheep go in through this door, me, because they are saved and have salvation, now they can enter in and out freely and get both. Inside the pen, you get security, right? You're protected. The shepherd is there, and so on and so forth. Outside the pen, you have freedom to roam. And in the freedom of the salvation, you have freedom to get, if you're using Psalm 23 imagery, still waters and green pastures. But the thieves, oof. Do you hear what he says? They only come to steal, kill, and destroy. But he says, I have come to give life and life abundant. That's a quite striking contrast, isn't it? Now, here's where things get a bit more complicated. Leslie Newbegin, a theologian, says this. The difference here between Jesus, the door, and the thieves and the robbers as the door isn't the offer, it's the result. What he's saying is everyone who says, I'm the door, I have the key to life, I have the success or the answers to things, offers the same thing, but the outcome is different. The offer by all leaders, shepherds, gates, whoever, not named Jesus, is the same. They say, look, believe in what I say, enter into my faith or my way of life, my community, and I will give you 2 things, security and freedom. Security so that you can belong in this group, find protection, safety, and home where you feel like you belong, and then freedom to go out and explore, still protected, and then find the green pastures and still waters of your heart. And what he's saying is, whether we like it or not, the offer by Jesus and these others are the same, but the results are different. And Jesus makes that clear. Jesus gives life abundant. The other ones come to kill, steal, and destroy. And so then again, the choice is, who will you trust? Who will you follow? But again, to put it clearly, the choice isn't simple as knowing, oh, these guys are going to kill, steal, and destroy. Should avoid them, versus this one is giving life and life abundant. In life, the choices are never this clear, is it? You see this throughout history. Every political leader, every religious leader, every leader of any kind, and nowadays, every social ideology, which is a fancy way of saying every way of life given by someone who has a fancy YouTube channel and a bunch of Instagram followers and a good TikTok handle, any single one of these people will say, if you believe what I'm telling you about the way that life is meant to be lived, I will give you security and freedom. But what Jesus is saying is every single one of those people, you have one at the cost of the other. Security at the cost of freedom, or freedom at the cost of security. But I am giving you both. They'll say, find security. Find the peace of mind that when you then enter into our group, when you then enter into our fold, when you enter into our people and our community, then you have protection. We'll love you and you'll belong and you'll always be one of us. But we all know that if you do so, then you actually don't have freedom, because the moment you venture out from whatever the parameters of that group is, you no longer belong. You're an outsider now. You got to choose one or the other. If you really want the freedom to go and explore and do whatever you want, well, then you got to get out from the boundaries of whatever that is, and then you got to get out. The classic example is, again, students and maybe college or getting out. If you want the security and the freedom of your house, the fridge that's stocked and the food that comes at every mealtime, so on and so forth, you got to play by your parents' rules. But if you really want to get out there and explore, then you got to say, well, you know what, I'm out, I'm going to go fend for myself, pay with my own money, and do all that stuff. There's really no in-between, it feels. But Jesus says, I can give you both, security and freedom. Security to belong and never fear, but the freedom to then go out and find green pastures. Now, I'm sure there are some of you going, Pastor Pete, you're a liar. The church is not one of those places. That's not who Jesus is. Jesus gives you security, but you have no freedom. The only way you can find freedom is to get out of this fold and then find your own way. Well, if you're thinking like that, hold on to that thought, because we'll address it a little later, I promise. But that's what Jesus is saying as the door. Enter this door and you'll get security and freedom. Salvation, and then the ability to go in and out. But anything else? Kill, steal, and destroy. Which one are you going to follow? Then the third example, the Good Shepherd. Now Jesus escalates the imagery now by adding an important adjective, good. I am the Good Shepherd. In Greek, that word best probably means best, true, appropriate, or genuine. I am the best, true, appropriate, or genuine shepherd. Now, why is he the Good Shepherd? He gives one reason and one reason only. And he says it's this, because I lay down my life for the sheep. And again, to make the comparison or the imagery clear, he gives a comparison. He says, there's me and then there's hired hands. They are not the good shepherd. They're not even actually shepherds. Why? Because although they're hired hands and certainly they'll do the job that they're asked to do much better than robbers and thieves, he's distinguishing between robbers and thieves, and then there's hired hands here. But the moment danger comes, what do the hired hands do? They bounce. I'm out. Why? Because though they are good people, perhaps, who do their job as long as they're paid and as long as they're safe, the moment danger comes, well, then that's where things change. Why? Because their heart is not really concerned about the sheep. Their heart is concerned about their pay and their job and what they're paid to do. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? They're doing what they're paid to do. But Jesus is saying, while those people might be fine and good, I'm the good shepherd and I'm different because I know and care. And because I know and care and these sheep have a relationship with me, when it comes to them, I will lay down my life to save them. It's what a good shepherd does. Now, this is where sometimes in the church we can get a little romantic about this. Oh, Jesus loves me so much, he would die for me. That's true. But we got to dig in a little bit, because dying for me in this kind of romantic imagery, we all know in the church means the cross. And the cross is not all that romantic if we're just being honest. And to be clear, when Jesus says, I lay down my life for the sheep, this is not romantic sweet nothings he's trying to say. This is not some dude trying to win the heart of a girl and be like, I love you so much, baby, I'll do anything for you. Anything. And you're like, oh, that's so sweet. That's not what Jesus is doing here, okay? Why? Because most of those dudes will never come through on their promise. Hopefully won't have an opportunity to come through on that promise if it includes dying for the other person. But Jesus actually did. But let's dig in, because there's levels to this, okay? Follow with me here. First, there's robbers and thieves, bad people, okay? And then above that, there's hired hands. Now, hired hands, again, good people. They do the job well, faithfully. But when danger comes, peace, I'm out. Then right above them is the shepherds, the first imagery that he gives. They also do the job well, faithfully, but when danger comes, they won't flee like hired hands because they're shepherds. But what do? They'll stay and they'll fight bravely, valiantly, courageously. Yeah, let's go. I love my sheep. I'm going to fight this beast. Now, while all of that is really, really good, let's just be realistic here. What's going to happen to the shepherd? They're going to die. Why? Because bears are bears, wolves are wolves, and shepherds are just people, okay? You're not, just get the romantic idea. They're going to die, okay? And what happens if the shepherd dies? Again, no matter how valiant they fought, the sheep, they're dead meat. The wolves and the bears are going to do what they came to do. They just got an extra meal in the person too. That's just how it happens. So while it's valiant and it's cool and it's certainly commendable, by all means, the end result is the sheep are scattered and they're dead meat. That's this level. Then there's the good shepherd level, a totally different level of shepherd. Now here's where things get a little weird. If you're here for the Luke series, the Backwards Kingdom series, this is where things get a little backward and a little quirky, because they don't go as you expect. If you're following the levels up, right? Hired hand, danger comes, they flee. Good regular shepherd, danger comes, they try to fight, but then they die. Then good shepherd, well, guess what? Danger comes, they fight. And like Samson, they rip the bear in half with their bare hands, and all this stuff, save the sheep, cool, and then, like medals of honor. That's not how this is actually going to happen. That's what you might expect. No. The reason the good shepherd is good is because he lays down his life, aka die voluntarily. Now you might be like, well, Pastor Pete, then nothing is different. If he dies voluntarily, the sheep are still dead because the shepherd is dead. What is the difference? Well, the difference is verse 17. The reason why the Father loves the Son is because he lays down his life. It's according to the plan. And you're like, wait, that still doesn't make any sense. It still means that he's dead. Well, no. Because why does Jesus lay it down according to the plan? Because it happens right afterwards. Because he's going to take it up again. Laying down the life is only step 1 of the plan. Taking it up is step 2 of the plan. And he, the good shepherd, is the only one that can execute step 2. Anybody can lay their life down. Anybody in this room. But only he can take it up as he wishes. It's why he lays it down in the first place. It's why he makes clear. Let's be clear about this. No one is taking my life. No. That's not how this works. I lay it down voluntarily, freely, by choice. And in the same freedom and choice and obedience, I take it up. He's saying, you see, in the beginning, my Father and I and the Spirit, the Trinity, we planned it this way because it's the only way to actually, truly save you. Why? Because this is the only way we can save you from the one weapon that the enemy has, and that is death. Then death can't no longer kill you. Because I lay it down, I take it up again. Now we're going to explore this a bit more next week, and I am the resurrection and the life. But that's the major claim he's talking about in being the good shepherd. So then, we have to then ask ourselves again, who is this that you're going to follow? Who is it that you're going to trust? More importantly, maybe we should be asking, how will you know if Jesus is the one to follow, the good shepherd? Because in my opinion, if you really believe he's the good shepherd, then you will, without a shadow of a doubt, trust and follow him. So I'm going to leave you with 3 reasons why I think he is the good shepherd and he's worth your follow and trust. 3 reasons from the text. There are others, but these are the ones that stuck out the most to me. So let's go to them and then we'll finish. First reason, because he is the knowing shepherd. This is one of those things that seems so basic, but just isn't basic. Let me tell you the truth. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the crucified and resurrected one, wants to know you. That's a statement that should rock our worlds if the Spirit allows us to hear it. I mean, ask and think. How many times in life do you or someone you know just desire and want and wish that someone would know me? And even more so than that, how much is it that we want? Not that someone would know me, but more so they would want and desire to know me. Not because they're forced to for any reason. You see, if I gave you a choice and said, you know what, you can pick one person that would desire with more than anything of their heart to know you and therefore know you, I think all of you would pick somebody really pretty, handsome, smart, accomplished, famous, whatever your thing is. But God of the universe, the one who speaks things into being, the one who dies voluntarily and then raises back up and resurrects, he wishes to know you, but it feels like he doesn't even make the list. He's not even an option sometimes. But it gets better. You see, even with knowing, I think we all understand as human beings, there's also levels to that too. Right? The basic level of knowing is our social media knowing. People who follow you and know you, like your post. They say they know you, and you say they know them, but you don't really know and or, you know. And then there's family, and then maybe best friends. Some people it's a little different, but there's that tier. They should really know you. That's another level of knowing. And then for those of us who are married in here, that's a whole nother level of knowing. That's supposed to be the ultimate level of knowing between human beings. And then there's a way higher level, and that's God's level. And he proves it. Verse 14, he says this, I am the good shepherd, and I know my own, and my own know me, even as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. Jesus knows his Father so well that they're 3 and yet 1. Somehow it gets conflated that you don't even know if 3 is 1. They're 3, but they're 1. But they're 1, but they're 3. They know each other like they literally. It's a whole level of knowing that we can't even wrap our mind around. It's a mystery. And he's saying the way that I know my Father, in that way is the way that I know you, and you're supposed to know me. That's, by the way, a level of knowing so far beyond a parent, a knowing, a crying child. And then it gets better because God says, I want to know you. That's why I died. Just imagine that. In the sea of the million voices in the world today, God is saying, I and my voice is the one that wants to know you. And the hope for us is that we would be able to hear, not when it's silent and completely dead quiet and there's only one voice in the room. That never works that way. The world is literally a million. We call it a cacophony of voices. And our hope is that we'd be able to hear the one still sweet voice of Jesus in the midst of it all. Why? Because he's the one who dies for us even when we ignore and betray him. Second, Jesus is the freeing shepherd. We've been talking about relationships a lot. And in this world, one of the most unfortunate and important things is that in all relationships, though it is not the design, relationships are full and fraught with anxiety and worry. Just insecurity everywhere. Does this person really love me? Will they keep loving me if I'm not as good as I want to be? Am I good enough for them to love me? If you're married, unfortunately, we probably felt this in our marriage at a time or two. Parents and children. In generations before, I think this is the worry of a lot of students. We're mostly Korean in here. If you're Asian American, that's what we felt. But in this generation, it feels like parents are just as worried if their kids will like them. Then you have friends and workplaces, and then if you have it in marriage, you obviously have it in dating. It's just literally what dating is all about, it feels. Even celebrities, we think they have it all, but they are constantly worried. I don't know if you watch Carpool Karaoke with James Corden, the Late Late Show. It's all done, whatever. The very last episode, if you don't know, you can look it up. I think it's mostly appropriate. It's just people singing songs in a car. He does it with Adele. Adele and James Corden, he's a late talk show. Anyways, they're really good friends. Adele is super famous, so is James Corden. And apparently, about 2 years ago, James Corden was going through this just massive anxiety about being a celebrity. Like, do these people really love me? Yada, yada, yada. And then so he was talking to Adele, and then Adele felt it so much, she wrote a song for him regarding that. And they're crying in the car and singing it. It's actually a very interesting moment of how much anxiety their lives are riddled with. But we all have it. But the one person who does not have it and does not give it is Jesus. Newsflash, Jesus is not worried whether you like him or not. He's not. He's not insecure about any of those things. You know why? Because he is unconditionally and completely loved by God the Father and the Spirit, so that they're three and yet one. And that's why he can then love you as he wants to. He can love you without any inhibitions, which means that we can then love and trust his love. The reason why we can't trust the love of our parents or our spouse sometimes is because their love is insecure. It's by nature that way because we're sinful beings. But God, his love is never insecure. He does not need us, but he desires us. And so we can trust then. That's why he can say, well, I'm never going to leave you nor forsake you. Why? Because he can. That's why he can then die on the cross. And though his Father forsakes him, and that sucks so much, he knows and he trusts that indeed God has a plan and he's going to come through. And if you want to know and to believe that indeed you can trust him that way, the one way you can know is he did all of these things for you before you ever believed, ever trusted, ever served, ever did anything. Find me a love like that. So he frees you from the insecurity of these relationships. Now, this is where we have to say that this does not mean that you can be whatever or anything you want to be. This is where we have to address that little thing that we said we left off before. Many of you would probably say, see, Jesus doesn't actually give unconditional acceptance. Well, maybe. And you'll say, well, no, Jesus doesn't actually give security and freedom. Well, no. You see, there's a lie out there in the world. There's actually no real thing as utter unconditional acceptance. It's not a thing. Security to belong and be whoever you are, no matter how you are, that's not a thing. And you'll say, oh, no. There are people like that in the world today, especially in the open world that we live in. There are people who say, you can be whatever you want, however you want, and we'll accept you, and we'll take you in. That's literally the basis of their thing. There are no rules. The only rule is you be yourself. Well, here's the thing. Every single group that's like that, will they choose to accept someone who says the thing that I choose to be in life is a mass murderer? They will not accept that person. But by virtue of the rule, they're going against their own rule because that person can choose in their freedom to do whatever they want. Because that's the idea, isn't it? Which means they also have boundaries. That's how this works. Because then the moment you say, no, that person doesn't belong, then you're saying that person is actually free to be whatever they want. They're now contradicting the exact rule of the group. But Jesus is saying, here's where I'm going to give you both security and or freedom. Because I died for you before you did anything else, I will actually love you through anything and all things. But when you believe in me, there is a way that the world was designed to work by me, and you want to follow those things. But if you choose to leave, and you choose to say, I don't want you anymore, I will always love you. Why? Because I died before you chose to believe. And that means you can always come back in and I will always accept you as long as you believe in the way. That is actual security. Come in and find the security of salvation. Go out and find the freedom to go, but always know that my cross stands for love through and through. That's freedom. Through repentance and belief. My death for you is always as you wish. It's 2. Then the last one. We'll finish. Giving shepherd. Verse 10 is actually the crux of the thing, and we haven't talked about it yet. But he says this, I came so that we have life and life to the full. And that word full means excess, like abundant. Now, when you hear this phrase, what comes to mind? Here's what came to mind at first, is this picture. Scrooge McDuck. Now, I have to do this because I'm old, and there are a lot of non-old people in here. Who has no idea who Scrooge McDuck is? It's like half the room, just be honest. No one is raising their hand. No one wants to participate. Okay. All the young people have no idea who it is. All the old people are going, oh, now I feel old. All the old people in here, older than me, they know who this is. This is the cartoon way back in the day. This is the duck, right? He owns so much money that he has a big vat of it, and then he swims in his money. It's ridiculous. I wanted to get a GIF. All the young people are like, what in the world is he talking about? I wanted to find a modern example. I couldn't find one. But anyways, this dude has so much money he can swim in it. That's the idea. Now, I think sometimes we think this is the idea of life and life to the full. How many of you wouldn't want to have so much money you could literally just swim in it? But let me ask you, is this the best abundance and excess? I would say no. And the reason is because, let me ask you, is there any way on this earth where you can have as much as that dude has, and yet for not 1 second be worried that it could all be taken away? Is there a way to secure all of this excess and fullness and make it somehow invincible to all things? And the answer to that is no. History will tell us it is literally not possible. But what Jesus gives is infinitely better. Here's how. Verse 17, 18. He says, for this reason, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life so that I can take it up again. No one has taken it away from me, but I lay it down on my own initiative. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This commandment is from my Father. Here's what Jesus is promising. And again, come back next week. We'll dive into it a bit more, but here's what it is. He's saying, my life that I'm promising you to the full is so excessive, so abundant, that even if you lose your life, if you are one who've entered through my door, me, and I am your good shepherd, then even if you lose your life, or better, when you choose to lay it down, I have the authority to take it up again. Which means that you don't actually lose it. You gain a better one through the losing. Every other rich-filled life in the world, whatever you think, it can be lost. And when it's lost, it's lost. But this one, it's so abundant and so excessive that even if you lose it, and even if you choose to lay it down, you will gain a life even greater, one that is eternal and full of joy, one that does not have shame, no tears, no sorrow, no pain, no death. All joy. That's the offer of the Good Shepherd. I've been debating whether I wanted to talk about this all day long. A couple minutes, so I'll address it. I don't know if you heard. Yesterday at Allen Premium Outlets Mall up in Dallas, Texas. I know people that live in Richardson and Frisco. There was a shooting at the Allen Premium Outlets Mall yesterday. As of last night, 8 dead, more critically injured. I've been to that outlet. Now, every time these things happen, we could talk about deaths and shootings literally. Our country is so full of them, we could talk about them literally every Sunday, and we would never run out. But here's the thing, and I apologize to put it this way, but it was just so striking to me. What Jesus is saying is, if you know me and I am the door, and you've entered through this door, and I am your good shepherd, then I give you life so much to the full that even if you lose it like many lost it yesterday, you don't actually lose it. You gain another one. As a parent with little ones going to malls and whatever, something like that yesterday, you don't ever want them to go see another mall. This is literally 4 hours up the road. So you're wondering and you're sitting there be like, no, I can't let them ever outside my sight. I have to protect them. But here's the thing. You can't protect them from everything. But Jesus says, I can give you life that does not end. Actually, through death, you gain more. Come back next week. We'll talk about it. Because in chapter 11, he calls himself the resurrection and the life. This is the gospel truth. And that God, that powerful, says, I want to know you, and I want to free you, and I want to love you, and I want to secure your life now and forever. Who will you trust, and who will you follow? Because the choices are not that easy. Parents in the room, who will you point your children to? What is their salvation? Are we teaching them to love school and academics and the money and the career that they can get? Are we teaching them that no matter what you get, no matter what school you go to, no matter all those things, without Jesus, none of those things can secure you forever? Students in the room, as you work hard and go to school, all those things, is that what you know? I hope and I pray that we are people, sheep of the Good Shepherd. And let me leave you with one last thing. It's just right in my mind. Did you notice? He says the sheep do not know the voice of the strangers. Well, in our world, we're too smart to not know the voices. Sometimes we have to humble ourselves and maybe become dumb like sheep to know that there's only one voice. Maybe that's why the choice is so difficult. So church, as we finish, will you take a moment and ask yourself, who am I following? And what life are they offering? And again, maybe it's not just Jesus and one other. It's literally Jesus and a million others. And our lives is following all of them. We're trying to follow as many as we can all the time. And maybe we have to ask ourselves, am I willing to try to follow Jesus, the one and only, the Good Shepherd, all of the time? And then have life, and life abundant. So, take a time and reflect. Hear his voice in the million of other voices. Pray that you'd be able to silence the other voices, true sweet voice that